Dean Martin is hiding. It's 1954. He's the biggest star in America, half of Martin and Lewis. The man who makes Frank Sinatra nervous. The man who makes Bing Crosby jealous. But right now, in a dressing room at NBC Studios in Burbank, the king of cool is sitting on the floor behind a costume rack, reading a Batman comic book, like a 12-year-old hiding from his mother. The whiskey glass sits untouched on his desk. The cigarette burns forgotten in the ashtray. None of that matters now. The door opens. JerryLewis walks in, sees the comic book, sees the panic in Dean's eyes. Dean shoves it under his jacket. Too late. Jerry doesn't laugh, doesn't mock, doesn't say a word. He just nods, closes the door behind him. What JerryLewis discovered in that dressing room would stay secret for 40 years. A secret about the only thing that ever made Dean Martin nervous. And the only man who ever made Dean Martin starstruck? It wasn't Sinatra. It wasn't Crosby. It wasn't even the President of the United States. It was the man who created Batman. To understand why Dean Martin was hiding comic books in 1954, you have to understand what it meant to be a man in Hollywood. The entertainment industry in the 1950s wasn't just a business. It was a factory of masculinity. Men were supposed to be tough, stoic, sophisticated. They drank scotch, not soda. They read Hemingway, not funny pages. They discussed politics and women and war, not superheroes. Comic books were for children, for the weak, for people who couldn't handle the real world. And Dean Martin, the man who had reinvented himself from Dino Crocetti, the poor Italian kid from Steubenville who couldn't speak English until he was 5, understood image better than anyone in Hollywood. He had built Dean Martin from nothing. The name, the voice, the walk, the attitude, every piece carefully constructed, every detail calculated. One wrong move and the whole thing could collapse. Back in Steubenville, when Dino was still a kid with holes in his shoes, comic books were the only escape, the only color in a gray world of steel mills and coal dust. His father worked 6 days a week at the barber shop. His mother barely spoke English. The other kids called him Doggo and Wop and threw rocks at him on his way home from school. But in those comic books, none of that mattered. Batman didn't care where you came from. Superman didn't ask about your accent. Heroes were heroes. And a poor Italian kid could dream. The only book Dean Martin ever read in his entire life was Black Beauty. A story about a horse who was judged by how he looked. A horse who was misunderstood. But the comic books, those he read by the hundreds. And nobody could ever know. Summer of 1946. Martin and Lewis. Their first year together. Sharing a dressing room the size of a closet. Sharing sandwiches when they couldn't afford two. Sharing dreams when reality wasn't enough. That night, Jerry found Dean sitting on the fire escape. 3 in the morning, reading a comic book by streetlight. Dean looked up, caught, guilty. His shoulders tensed, his fingers curled around the pages like he was protecting something precious. "They help me sleep," Dean said. His voice was different, younger. "My head gets too loud sometimes." Jerry didn't ask questions. He just sat down next to his partner. The metal fire escape creaked under their weight. Somewhere below, a car horn echoed through the empty streets. Which one? Batman. Why Batman? Dean was quiet for a long moment. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Because he wasn't born a hero," Dean said. "He's just a guy who decided to become one. No powers, no magic. Just a decision. Just a mask." Jerry nodded. He didn't fully understand, but he understood enough. The next day, JerryLewis walked into a comic book shop on the Atlantic City boardwalk. Murray's Comics, run by a man named Murray Feldstein, who had been selling funny pages since 1941. Jerry bought every Batman comic in the store. That night, he handed Dean a brown paper bag. No words, just the bag. Dean opened it, saw the comics, and for the first time since Jerry had known him, Dean Martin's eyes got wet. His breath caught, his lips pressed together. "Nobody's ever don't mention it, Pally," Jerry said. "And I mean that, don't mention it, ever." They talked about it again. But every week for 10 years, the brown paper bag appeared in Dean's dressing room. No note, no acknowledgement, just the bag. Murray Feldstein would remember JerryLewis for the rest of his life. He came every Thursday, Murray would say. Decades later, same time, same order. Batman, Superman, Captain Marvel, the whole stack. He never said who they were for. But I knew. Everyone in the business knew. They were for his partner. They were for Dino. And then something changed. The brown paper bag wasn't enough anymore. By 1954, Dean Martin was the biggest star in America. The Martin and Lewis films were breaking box office records. The television appearances were selling out sponsors. The nightclub shows were packed every night, but Dean couldn't walk into a comic book shop himself. Too embarrassing, too exposed, too dangerous for the image he had built, so he built a secret library instead. Vincent Ricci worked security at NBC Studios from 1958 to 1974. He had seen everything: movie stars, politicians, mob bosses, scandals that made the papers. But the strangest thing he ever saw was Dean Martin's dressing room. Everyone else had liquor bottles, photographs, awards, Vincent would recall 40 years later. Mr. Martin had a locked drawer, bottom right of his desk. He thought nobody knew what was inside. Vincent knew. He had seen Dean open it once, late at night, when everyone else had gone home, when the king of cool thought he was alone. Comic books, hundreds of them, stacked perfectly, organized by series: Batman, Superman, Captain America, Wonder Woman, the whole collection. The king of cool's secret library. But in March 1962, something happened that almost exposed everything. A visitor came to NBC Studios, a visitor Dean Martin had been waiting his entire life to meet. March 14, 1962, 7:15 p.m., NBC Studios, Burbank. The hallway outside Studio 4 is empty. Everyone has gone to dinner. The lights are dimmed. The cleaning crew won't arrive for another hour. Everyone except Dean Martin. Dean is walking toward his dressing room when he sees him. A small man in a brown suit, glasses, quiet demeanor, standing by the water fountain, looking lost. Dean recognizes him immediately, not from photographs, not from television appearances, from the credit boxes in the corner of every Batman comic he has ever read, the small signature in the bottom right, the name he has traced with his finger 1,000 times, Bob Kane. Dean's feet stop moving, his heart doesn't, his hands start to tremble, his breath quickens. His spine straightens like someone has plugged him into an electrical socket. This isn't how Dean Martin reacts to anyone. He has met presidents, he has met mobsters, he has met the most beautiful women in the world, and he has never, not once, felt his hands shake. But this is different. This is Bob Kane. This is Batman's father, Mr. Kane. Bob Kane turns, sees Dean Martin, the biggest star in television, walking toward him. Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry, I was looking for the green room I'm supposed to be on a panel discussion about. I know who you are. The words come out wrong. Too fast, too eager. Dean sounds like a kid meeting his hero, because that's exactly what he is. Bob Kane blinks. He wasn't expecting this. He was expecting the cool, detached Dean Martin from the television screen. The man who seemed to care about nothing. This man cares. This man cares very much. Would you? Dean's voice catches. He clears his throat, tries again. Would you come to my dressing room? I have something to show you, but you can't tell anyone, ever. Bob Kane nods, confused, intrigued. Dean's hands are still shaking as he unlocks the door. He never lets anyone in his dressing room. Not Frank, not Sammy, not even Jerry anymore. But this is Bob Kane. This is the man who created the only hero Dean ever believed in. Dean walks to his desk, opens the locked drawer. Bob Kane stares at the comic books, hundreds of them, pristine condition, every Batman issue since 1939, 23 years of careful collecting, 23 years of hiding. Mr. Martin, I had no idea. Nobody does. Dean picks up the first Batman comic he ever owned. The edges are worn, the colors are faded, but he has kept it for 23 years, through poverty and fame, and 3 marriages and 1,000 hotel rooms. I was 16 when I bought this, Dean whispers. Back in Steubenville, I couldn't read English good, but I could read the pictures, and I understood this guy, this Bruce Wayne. He looks at Bob Kane. His eyes are wet, the mask is crumbling. He wasn't born a hero. He made himself into one, put on a mask, became someone else, created a whole new person out of pain and will. Dean's voice drops even lower. I did the same thing, Mr. Kane. Dino Crocetti put on a mask, became Dean Martin. Your comic book taught me that was possible. He pauses, smiles, that real smile. Ain't that a kick in the head? Bob Kane doesn't know what to say. He has received fan mail from children, from soldiers, from people in hospitals, but he has never received anything like this. You created Batman, Dean says, but Batman created me. The silence stretches between them. 2 men in a dressing room, one who created a hero, one who became one. Vincent Ricci was walking past the dressing room when he heard it. Not the words, the tone. Dean Martin's voice, soft, vulnerable, young, a voice Vincent had never heard before in 16 years of working at NBC. He didn't stop, didn't look, just kept walking. Some moments are too private to witness, but 40 years later, at Dean Martin's memorial service, Vincent told a reporter what he had heard through that door. It sounded like a kid meeting his hero, Vincent said, like a little boy who finally got to say thank you. I worked around Mr. Martin for 16 years. I never heard him sound like that, not once. Whatever happened in that room, it wasn't the king of cool, it was someone else, someone real. Bob Kane kept his promise. He never told a soul about that meeting. Not journalists. Not other artists. Not even his wife. When people asked him about celebrity fans, he would smile and change the subject. The real collectors, he would say, don't want publicity. They just want the stories. He and Dean exchanged Christmas cards for the next 30 years. Simple cards, no personal notes. Just one signature. To the real Bruce Wayne, BK. Dean kept every one. But the secret almost didn't survive. That night in 1967, a reporter from Life magazine was doing a profile on Dean Martin. He was granted access to the dressing room. He was asking questions about the television show, the movies, the Rat Pack, and then he noticed the locked drawer. "What's in there, Mr. Martin?" Dean's smile didn't waver. His voice didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on the arm of his chair. "Tax documents," Dean said. "Boring stuff. You wouldn't be interested." The reporter accepted the answer. He never looked inside. But Dean moved the collection that night. Took everything home. Never kept comics at the studio again. When Martin and Lewis split in 1956, the brown paper bag stopped. For the first time in 10 years, Dean had to buy his own comics. He couldn't do it. He tried once. Walked into a shop in Beverly Hills, saw a teenage boy browsing the Batman rack. Dean turned around, walked out. Too embarrassing. Too exposed. For 6 months, Dean didn't read a single comic book. It was his daughter Gail who solved the problem. She was 12 years old. She noticed her father seemed sad, distant. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Dean couldn't explain, couldn't tell his own daughter about the comics. But Gail was smart. She had seen the brown paper bags. She had seen her father reading late at night when he thought everyone was asleep. The next week, Gail started a comic book collection, a hobby for a 12-year-old girl. Every Thursday, she would go to the shop, buy a stack of comics, leave them on the kitchen table. By morning, they would be gone. Neither of them ever mentioned it. A reporter once asked Dean Martin about his reading habits. "Mr. Martin, what's the last book you read?" Dean thought about it, smiled his famous smile. "Black Beauty." The reporter laughed. "The children's book, about the horse, that's the one. When did you read it?" 1932, I was 15. The reporter waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. Dean Martin had read one book in his entire life, a book about a horse who was judged by appearance, a horse who was misunderstood, a horse whose inner worth had nothing to do with how the world saw him. "That horse was me," Dean would say, years later, in a rare moment of honesty. Everyone looked at him and saw one thing, but inside, he was something else entirely. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995. The obituaries talked about the voice, the movies, the Rat Pack, the television show, the whiskey glass and the cigarettes and the beautiful women. Nobody mentioned the comic books. Nobody knew. When Dean's family cleaned out his bedroom, they found a box under his bed. Not the expensive art, not the gold records, not the photographs with presidents and movie stars. Comic books, hundreds of them, still organized, still pristine, and on top of the pile, Batman 1, May 1940, the first appearance of the Joker, one of the rarest comics in existence, worth millions. Dean could have sold it, could have displayed it, could have told the world he owned it. He kept it under his bed, like a kid hiding from his parents. The whiskey glass was always in Dean's hand, on stage, on camera, in photographs, but the glass was usually filled with apple juice. The drunk act was just that, an act. The real Dean Martin was stone cold sober, reading comic books in his dressing room while the world thought he was drinking himself to sleep. The mask had a mask, the image had a truth, and the truth was a poor Italian kid from Steubenville, who never stopped needing heroes. We all have secret shames, things we love that we think we shouldn't, hobbies we hide, passions we keep quiet. We're afraid of what people will think, afraid of being judged, afraid of being seen as weak, or childish, or uncool. Dean Martin was the king of cool, and the king of cool read comic books in secret for 50 years. We all wear masks, the confident mask at work, the happy mask at parties, the everything's fine mask with family. But underneath every mask is someone who just wants to be seen, to be known, to be accepted for who they really are. Dean Martin wore the greatest mask in Hollywood history, but he never stopped being Dino Crocetti, the kid who couldn't speak English, the kid who got beaten up for being Italian, the kid who found heroes in comic books because he couldn't find them anywhere else. 40 years. That's how long Dean kept the secret. 40 years of fame, 40 years of applause, 40 years of being the coolest man in America, and every night before he went to sleep, he read a comic book. Somewhere in a storage unit in Los Angeles, there's a brown paper bag, faded, worn, 50 years old. JerryLewis kept it. The first bag he ever gave Dean. Atlantic City, 1946. Inside the bag, nothing. The comics are long gone. But Jerry couldn't throw it away. Because that bag wasn't about comic books. It was about friendship, about secrets, about saying I see who you really are and I'll never tell. Dean Martin was the king of cool, but Jerry Lewis knew the truth. The king of cool was just a kid who loved Batman, and that kid deserved someone who wouldn't laugh. Ain't that a kick in the head?